the Portuguese professor Boaventura de Souza Santos did a very important study in Brazil about land occupation. He was studying how the land in the favelas, like in the poor areas, were being occupied, and one of the things that he figured out is that the legal system was not being applied to those pieces of land. Like significant portions of the land in Brazil were governed by a parallel legal system, like different rules for the transmission of land, for the occupation of land. And these studies in the 70s started an important school of thought that is called legal pluralism. That is one of the main schools of thought in the sociology of law. So put that aside for a moment, and let me give you some information about the cultural industry in Brazil. So if you take the music industry, and if you take like a historical series of physical units being sold in the country, you'll see that there is a radical drop in the past 5 years, in the last years, I mean. If you take a look at the largest Brazilian record label, which is Sony BMG, in the year of 2006, Sony BMG only released 13 CDs of Brazilian music. So that's very few for a musical country like Brazil. If you take a look at the newspapers, for instance, the largest Brazilian newspaper, Folha de São Paulo, is the same thing. There's a very significant drop in the past 5 years in the daily circulation of this particular newspaper and all the others. If you go to the publishing market, it's just the same thing. This is the numbers that are available. These are the total revenues in Brazilian currency for the book publishing market in the country. And if you take like the movie market, it's very similar. 352 movies were released in Brazil last year, only 51 were Brazilian. The top box office in 2004, as you see, there is no Brazilian movie in that. And if you take a look at the number of the public attending movie theaters, there's a significant trend of drop, and also in terms of revenue. So if you take a look at the cultural industry, it's pretty much going on everywhere, especially in the developing countries. There's a sign of change. Of course, there are changes in the habits of the consumer, but these numbers, they mean that something is changing. So the second thing I would like to talk about is that there are business models emerging from what we call the commons. So now there's this new trend of thinking about intellectual property and culture, which is the idea of the commons. And this has led to a project that is mainly based in Brazil, South Africa, and the UK, that is called the Open Business Project. So the results I would like to present to you today are the results of this particular project in Brazil. And the Open Business Project is focused on analyzing these business models that are emerging from the commons. So you could make a decision to analyze in Brazil, for instance, the so-called Web 2.0 projects, because these projects are also present in Brazil. So we could have analyzed, for instance, the Brazilian Wikipedia. This is the Portuguese page for Jonas Brunfield. We could have analyzed like websites like Trama Virtual, which is a place where you can basically put your music. And there are more than 30,000 artists, like more than 100,000 phono records made available for free in this website. We could have analyzed Videolog, which is the Brazilian version for YouTube, which actually uses Creative Commons. We could have analyzed Overmundo project, a project that I am involved in, is a citizenship journalism project. Or we could have analyzed the Cielo project, which is a very important and large open publishing initiative, not only in Brazil, but in also other countries in Latin America. But we did nothing of that. We decided that in Brazil, we were not interested in what we can call the legal commons. The legal commons is something that I call, which is using licenses. So for instance, you could use the GNU Free Documentation license, you could use like Creative Commons, you could use other licenses that are based on the legal system, and and people voluntarily create a commons. So let's call this the legal commons. So when we started the Open Business Project in Brazil, we were interested in another kind of commons, not the legal commons. We were interested in what's happening in what we can call the so-called peripheries of the world and how they are cultural industries. This is taking place everywhere, but the Brazilian Open Business Project concentrated in a few countries. So it concentrated in Brazil, it concentrated in Colombia, where we studied the fusion music scene. We concentrated in Mexico, where we studied the publishing initiatives that are taking place there. We focused also in Argentina, where we studied like the musical scene called chamamé. And we focused in Nigeria, where we studied the Nigerian film scene, the Nigerian film industry, which is actually the third largest in terms of revenues in the world today. So actually, Professor Ana Maria Ochoa, who coordinated the research in Colombia, will be here tomorrow. I'm not going to focus in the other countries, I'm going to focus in Brazil, and I would like to give you the results for the research that we did there in this musical scene called Technobrega. Technobrega in English stands for something like techno kitsch or techno cheesy, and it's a music scene that takes place in that state called Pará. And it's a mix between 80s electronic music and very romantic lyrics and songs, so it's kind of very good to dance. And at the same time that the Sony DMG is releasing like 13 CDs per year, Technobrega releases 400 or plus. And they release also 100 DVDs. So it's a very evolved music industry, very consistent, and it generates lots of revenues. I'll give you the numbers very soon. And technology is a very important part of it. This is a music industry that is 100% based on the use of technology in a very poor state, in very poor regions. So these are some of the pictures of the so-called sound system parties, aparelhagem parties. This is where people actually go for dancing Technobrega. You see, laser. You can see like people dancing there, they're happy. This is the so-called entrance of the sound system. There's a code of technology, so the sound system companies, they have to change the technology every year, otherwise they lose public. So this is a celebration when the new technology arrives, and they have like this special party to celebrate the new equipment. And you know, it's very much based. And these are the places where the music is sold. So if you go to a store to buy a Technobrega CD, you won't find it, because 100% of the music is sold through the street vendors, the same people who sell generally pirated stuff. But in this case, it's not piracy, because people from the Technobrega scene actually deliver the music, the CDs to be sold through the street vendors. So if you want more information, there is some at the Open Business website. But the final report, including all the countries, Nigeria, Colombia, etc., will be released at the ICOMOS conference that is taking place in Dubrovnik, Croatia, in July. So it will be actually June, sorry. So at the ICOMOS, we're going to release the full materials. A substantial part will be translated into English. How the Technobrega industry works. In the top of everything, there are the DJs and the bands, the artists. So the artists actually pay independent recording studios in order to record their music, and they get their recordings and they give them to these distributors, which are street vendors. They don't get money out of this, they just give it to the street vendors so that the street vendors can disseminate and sell it as free as they can. Then the public buys the records from the street vendors at halls, and they perform there. They get paid by the sound system parties, where they perform that as well. So the public pays these two entities. And there's a very interesting character in the system, which is the producer or party funder. This is a sort of a venture capitalist. Of course, the proportion is very different. But these are the guys who finance. Sometimes they are partners of the whole enterprise. So it's a kind of a leveraged market. And most interesting, we figured out that the bands and the DJs, they sell their records directly to the public at the live concerts. Sometimes they actually record their live performances and they sell them right after the performance has been made. So you go home and you buy the record of the concert that you just attended. So let's get to the numbers. We made, during a period of almost 1 year, we interviewed like 279 bands, that number of sound system parties, and that number of street vendors. It's a very substantial sample, so the results are pretty much accurate because the universe we covered, the sample is pretty significant. In the interviews, we figured out that 88% of all the artists never had any contact with record labels whatsoever. And that also means that they don't have any music registered, they don't collect money from public performance agencies or anything like that. So we asked them, do these street vendors help your business? And 59% said yes. 32% said no, they do not help, and 9% were neutral. For them, it's indifferent. They don't help and don't disturb the business as well. So we also measured how many times these artists they played for per month. And the total number of concerts that a single artist has is approximately 12 per month. 8 of them are performed solo and 4 with other bands in a festival or something like that. The average payment for each performance is $1,100, and when they play with other bands, it's $700. And the average salary in the region of Belém is $350. So it's a good pay. They're being paid more than the average salary, monthly salary in the region of Belém, Pará. Also, the aggregate monthly revenue for the bands, we measured that and it's approximately $1.6 million. And 1.2 come from the solo performance, the rest come from performances with other bands. And this is very interesting. The average CDs sold at the concerts by the artists is 77, and the number of DVDs being sold is 53. And we figured out that the artists do not compete with the street vendors. There's a product differentiation. If you buy the CD in the street vendors, it comes like in a plastic bag with no printed material, and it's cheaper. If you buy them directly from the artists at the concerts, it's more expensive, and it comes with like graphic materials. It's better produced, so it's a different project, and this is an important revenue for the band. So if you buy the CDs directly from the bands, they cost $2.50, and a DVD costs $5. While if you buy them in the streets, mostly it's $1 per CD and $3 or $2 per DVD. So the number of parties organized by the sound systems is approximately 6 for each sound system per month. And the total average of parties in the state of Belém is 4,000 parties per month. So you can, it's a lot of parties, like every day, party a lot for Belém, Pará. Finally, the total revenue for the sound system company is 1.5 million per month. And the fixed assets, we measure like how many computers do you have, how many TV screens, and they all have at least one. That's something that we figured out. The fixed assets are approximately 80 million for all the sound system companies. So let's get back to Professor Boaventura. What I want to say is, on one side you have the legal commons idea, on the other side you have a different sort of commons emerging from society. These commons take place where intellectual property is either irrelevant, unknown, or unenforceable, which is the case for a large majority of portions of the world today. So if you call and you think about this idea of the commons, at the same time you have the legal commons, you have also an idea of social commons. There is commons emerging from portions of the world where IP is simply not a factor. Pay attention because this is very important. This is not a dichotomy between the South or the North. between the poor and the rich, or between the center and the periphery. The idea of social commons is everywhere. It's, for instance, in the big state markets that take place in London and New York, and it's in many internet businesses that have problems with the law themselves. So there is a certain globalization of the idea of informality and the idea of social commons going on. So my point here, and then I'm finished, is when we think about the AGK movement, it's important that we think not only the legal commons, Web 2.0 side of the story, but also that we pay attention to the social commons side of the story. Okay, thank you.